So I'm going to be sharing my testimony over, I don't know how long it's going to take, but it's a great blessing. Revelation 12, verse 11, it tells you it's a blessing, right? It says they overcame by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. As we share what God has done for us, it gives strength, encouragement, and hope to us as well as to others. So I'm endeavoring to share this because God has done so much for me, but in the process, I expect to get a blessing myself. You look back in the Old Testament, in Genesis 12, verse 1, God told Abraham, he said, look, you need to get ye out of your father's house. I want you to go to a land, I'm not going to tell you where you're going, a land you know not. I want you to get up and start walking. Abraham did. Romans 4, verse 3, Abraham believed God, and it was counted unto him for righteousness. Abraham got up and he started walking. But something Abraham had learned, and that was a long road to Canaan. Something Abraham had learned is that the world is not his home. Planet Earth is not our home. It says, Hebrews 11, verse 10, he looked for a city that hath foundations, whose builder and maker is God, not man, but God. And then if you ask Abraham where home is, he'd say, it's not down here, it's up there. I'm just a pilgrim and a stranger. Hebrews 11, verse 13, Abraham, the patriarchs, the prophets, they responded, we are pilgrims and strangers, we're just passing through. So this world is not my home. And I'm temporarily residing in Western Tennessee, waiting to find the city whose builder and maker is God. And it's a long road home. We are so limited in our ability, our comprehension of how big God is. For us, a couple cell phones, right? You cannot hold two conversations at one time, right? If you have two people speaking to you on the telephone, you can't understand. Our brains are built to hear one voice at a time. Same is true about a book. If you put two pages in front of me, I can't read both pages at the same time. My brain is geared, my attention span is toward one page or one phone call at a time. God's not like that. When Samuel was going to anoint the next king of Israel after Saul, went up to the home of Jesse. He was looking at Jesse's sons, and he looked at Eliab. This was Jesse's tall, good-looking, handsome son, and he thought, surely this must be the next king. And then 1 Samuel 16, verse 7, God told Samuel, no. I don't see like you see. God doesn't see like a man sees. You look on the outside, God said, I look upon the heart. God can see all hearts all the time, all over the earth. We are so limited in what we see. But my dear friends, God reads all the hearts in all the lands, in all the world. And he can do it all at the same time. So for me, the Lord knew I was coming into this world, and you too. Everything I'm saying about me applies to you. We're all in the family of God, right? And he told Jeremiah 1:4, the word of the Lord came unto Jeremiah, verse 5, I knew you before you were in your mother's womb. That's right. I knew you before you were conceived. How long before? Now, think about that. How long did God know Jeremiah before he was conceived? And you can't say 10 years, because if he knew him 10 years but didn't know him 11, that doesn't make any sense. You can't say 1,000 years, because if God knew about Jeremiah 1,000 years before he was conceived, what about 1,001 years? No. The only answer that makes any sense is God knew Jeremiah from eternal ages past. He always knew that Jeremiah's mother and father, one would contribute the ovum, one the sperm cell. Jeremiah be born a zygote. They'd have 23 chromosomes from each parent. That's a physiology precedes conception. But my friends, God understands all about it, and he understands that Jeremiah is soon going to be born. And when Jeremiah comes into the earth, he tells him, right, I have sanctified you, ordained you, called you to be a prophet. I've got a purpose and a place for you, my son. And that was before Jeremiah was ever conceived. If it's true for Jeremiah, it must be true for us. Now, when you look at John chapter 14, verse 2, I go to prepare a place for you. Right? And if I go to prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself. I go to prepare a place for you. And if we're not so, I would have told you. The Lord has a place prepared for me and you, if we're faithful, in heaven. Well, friends, if he has a place in heaven, doesn't it make sense he'd have a place down here on this earth? So when Jeremiah was born, he was born into his place that God had given to him to fulfill the purpose that God had for him. God's got a purpose for you and for me. Had a purpose for Jesus. Galatians 4:4, in the fullness of time, God sent forth his son. Had a purpose for Abraham. Abraham, out of your father's house, this is not the place. Walk toward Canaan. I've got a purpose for you. In Romans 4 verse 3, Abraham believed God and it was counted unto him for righteousness. Abraham started walking. So my testimony, my personal testimony, I don't think it's any better or any different. I'm sorry, it's very different. It's any of more value than yours or anyone else's. Each person has a very personal, very unique experience. They have something to share that others will find to be a blessing. And it'll react upon themselves and it'll be a blessing as they share it. So why me? Why do I even take the time? Well, I got a letter from a dear friend in Latvia. His name's Cristiano. And he kind of raised the idea in his email he sent me a couple years ago about writing a book of my experience. And friends, it's not because my experience is some kind of, I don't know how to explain it. It's not that I have been a faithful Christian living the Christian life. I have not. I was born, raised a man as far from God as ever a man ever walked the earth. But in my life, it's a showcase for the grace of God and what he's willing to do for us. And that's why I share it. 1 Corinthians 4 verse 9, it says we're made a spectacle to the world, to angels, and to men. But if you look in the center column reference in the King James Bible, it's alternate translations. If you look in the center column reference of the King James Bible, it said we are made a spectacle. Now, the alternate translation, a theater. We're made a theater to the world, to angels, and men. And so each person has a life that's a theater. And my theater of my life is a showcase for the grace of God and what he is willing and able to do for anyone that seeks him out and desires to be with him. I have been forgiven much. That's the principles in Luke 7:47. It's talking about Mary just broken the alabaster box on Christ's head, and that woman was a sinner. And in Mark 16:9, she is described as out of whom Jesus had cast 7 devils, the first one to give a gospel sermon. Yeah, that's Mary. And Mary, washing the feet with her tears and drying them with her hair, when it hits verse 47, the Lord forgives her for her many sins. And he states the principle that if you've been forgiven much, you'll love much. My dear friends, I ought to love much because I have been forgiven much. So I'm going to be sharing over I don't know how many hours the story of what God has done for me. And it's nice when I'm 65 years old. When you're 65 and you look back, you see everything in retrospect. So I can say when I was born, like Jeremiah, the Lord knew I was coming into the world. And he had a place. He chose my parents for me. I did not choose where I would be born. I did not choose my parents, but God did. So when I was conceived in Atlanta, and when I was born in Crawford Long Hospital, the Lord had a plan laid out for me that had been in his mind and heart for eternal ages. Before I was in my mother's womb, he knew me. Now today, we've gotten so educated on genetic inheritance and epigenetics and all these scientific subjects. Sometimes we forget that the Lord is in control of our destiny. So today we say, well, the genes of a child, right? You get 23 chromosomes from mom, 23 from dad, you got 46 chromosomes. And largely, you're a prisoner of your genes, that is ridiculous. We know even in lifestyle disease today, if your grandmother was diabetic, your mother was diabetic, you have diabetes all over your family tree, that by your choices, you can change the expression of your genes. If you have a gene for diabetes, 3 terms that epigeneticists use. They say the gene for diabetes is turned on, turned off, is active, inactive, is expressing, not expressing. So if you're born with diabetes, if you're born with a genetic predisposition toward diabetes, you don't have to be diabetic. By your decisions, by your lifestyle, you can change the way the genes express themselves. And the same is true in spiritual things. It's true. You may inherit a genetic disposition toward depression, toward alcohol abuse, toward a lot of things. But my dear friends, God has made us free moral agents that by our choices, we have control of our genetic inheritance. Our genetic inheritance does not control us. So we're in the driver's seat this morning. Christ is in the driver's seat this morning. We're in the back seat. Say, Lord, take me down that long road home and help me to be a willing passenger as you take us home. God bless you. You have a nice day.